And welcome into another episode of Tiger Territory, part of the Foul Territory Network, Detroit Tigers podcast. I'm Kieran Steckley. With me, as always, is a man who's quite the purveyor of freshly cut green grass. He is Cody Stavenhagen. How you doing?
Doing all right, Kieran. Hey, that field at Publix Field at Joker Marchant Stadium, it's a little yellowed. They got to get that grass going. There is, I think, it's kind of been a drought in Florida. I don't know what's up. Grounds crew, hey, they know what they're doing, but they got some work ahead of them this spring.
Well, I guess they're just like everybody else, right? They got a lot of work ahead of them. The Tigers obviously have a lot of work ahead of them. And today, we're recording this mere hours after the first, I guess you would say, official workday in Tigers land. Heard from Scott, heard from AJ, heard from Framber, got to see JV running around. I don't know where you want to start. Well, I guess we'll just let's start with this. This is kind of like a staple for us here, and it's fun to do this after the first day. The first vibe check of 2026. Day one of camp, first day of school, all those vibes. What can you tell us, Cody?
It's day one of spring training. The vibes are always good. The pessimistic view is the vibes are downhill from here. Unless you win the World Series, you're probably not going to again achieve the all around good vibe of day one of spring training. But I will say this was as good of a day one as I remember, as I've been around. And you know what? I do indeed think it had a lot to do with a guy named Justin Verlander. Seeing this guy back in a Tigers uniform was pretty cool. I think Justin Verlander was enjoying himself. This dude, nearing his 43rd birthday, having done this a million times in his life, was smiling every time I looked at him. He went through PFP like all the other guys and all the young guys, and he was maybe the first person in history to do PFP with a smile on his face. I think he was enjoying being there. I think he kind of lifted everyone's spirits. Everyone was, some guys who were brave enough to talk to him were trying to get some time in. Some guys were probably a little afraid to approach Justin Verlander. I saw Tarek Skubal greet Framber Valdez with a big bear hug. I don't know if he had ever, even interacted with him once before in his life. But yeah, everyone was certainly enjoying themselves, feeling good about the team, and especially feeling good about their new signings. I did talk to Reese Olson, who probably was not feeling as good, but all things considered, I think Reese is doing all right. So yeah, everyone except Reese Olson. Really good day for them.
Well, I guess, like, not to. We'll get back to some other good vibe stuff, but you brought
Yeah.
up Reese Olson. Might as well kind of dive in there because we got a little bit of clarity, I guess. And so people that maybe are catching up, February 2nd, he had shoulder surgery. Always challenge him. You got to say those consecutively,
Just say
right?
right labral repair. That's easier. Oh wait,
I
no,
don't
it's
know if that
not.
is easier, but but yeah. So essentially, and I'm gonna qualify this, and then you correct me if I'm missing any details here, Cody. Essentially, he re-injured his shoulder in October. I believe it was after the season was over, and then you go to see specialists and doctors, and they kind of tell you like, we could try to rehab this, might have to have surgery. But the bottom line was that had he had the surgery then, he still would have been missing the 2026 season. So the thought was, might as well try the rehab to see if you can pitch in 2026, knowing that surgery was always sort of at the end of the road and it wasn't going to affect anything long term, I guess. Is that kind of a good
Yeah, I
summary?
think that's well said because from the outside, it's definitely easy to say, wait, why didn't he just have surgery right away? Is this going to cost him time? According to Reese Olson, no, the timeline of that surgery is one where it is long enough he was going to miss 2026 if he had it in October or if he had it in February, but also short enough, I guess I haven't fully done the math to fact check this, but short enough that 2027 should still be a go for him, even though he had this surgery in February. So it's not really affecting his timeline in terms of actual major league games. They gave it a go. He was throwing, I think, out to 120 feet and started feeling something again, and they had to do the surgery. So unfortunate, but I think it was one of those things that was just bound to happen.
Yeah, and I mean, hate to kind of elicit this like memory, but it did kind of remind me of the Casey Mize situation from a couple years ago where AJ Hinch had kind of said like, look, like you just can't really know what's underneath until you go in, under the knife. But you always want to avoid going under the knife, right? So
Yeah.
that kind of reminded me of that. And, it's an unfortunate reality. And of course, he's still young enough and has a promising enough future, as we talked about previously, that like, going for, the possibility of playing in 2026 is great, but the long term, uh, you want
Yeah.
what's best for him for the long term, especially given all these other pitching scenarios
Right.
that
I
the
would say
Tigers have.
real quick, if we want to get away from day one of spring training, it's not actually great for your 2027 outlook, even though Reese Olson is going to be healthy. I think there's one reason Framber Valdez getting the opt out after year 2 instead of year 1 was really important. We know Scooble, Mize, Flaherty, now Verlander, all going to be free agents. But not only is Jackson Jobe returning, but kind of a question mark. Reese Olson will be a question mark instead of you feel pretty good if you get a full season of Reese Olson and then you got him rolling in 2027. That 2027 rotation is going to be Valdez and a lot of question marks. We'll see if Troy Melton has a good year and if he's healthy this year, but otherwise, certainly a lot up in the air. So that is one of the more unfortunate things about Reese losing this whole season.
Well, also on the injury report, but in the more realm of good news, was Dillon Dingler had an elbow procedure that apparently, again, it's funny how we always got to talk about injuries where it's like surgery, last resort, terrible. And I know pitchers and different, I understand all that, but it's like, all right, I had a surgery, no big deal. I'll miss some time, but no big deal. And so you got like the kind of the two, day one in camp, you got kind of the two realms of arm surgeries, I guess you could say. But like I said, Dillon Dingler, elbow procedure. I guess it's something he's dealt with before. It doesn't really that didn't seem like anybody was overly I don't want to say overly worried about it. Didn't seem like anybody was worried about it at all.
Yeah, Dingler and AJ Hinch both seem pretty chill about that whole thing. I guess it was an arthroscopy, which is more of cleaning stuff up than it is, you're not replacing a ligament or anything that's going to cost you a great amount of time. I would still say for a throwing catcher as young as Dingler to have already had this done twice, that maybe worries me a little bit. For like one day will, a more serious procedure have to happen, but for now, I think all is good. He's like not going to be maybe catching as many bullpens or certainly throwing as many balls back to pitchers early on in camp. Maybe his like full ramp up will be a little bit delayed, but at least according to what Dingler and others said, he'll be all go for opening day, and I think this will hardly affect him even in spring training.
All right, well, that is certainly good news. So, kind of back to like the camp vibes here for a second, Cody. I like like a lot of times the way my brain works is I'm always kind of trying to find like greater meanings in the story, right? And I'm sure as a writer you do that as well. And like to me, given everything that we talked about with this team over the offseason and then the moves that they made in a flurry over the past couple of weeks, combined with the moves that didn't get made with the offense, and I know Scott Harris addressed that today with you guys in the media. Like every year, pitchers and catchers, literally every year, pitchers and catchers report first. But damn it, if it didn't seem very fitting that pitchers and catchers are leading the charge, for into spring training for this specific squad. Because again, the Verlander piece, the Kenley Jansen piece, like I know Finnegan like was a trade deadline acquisition, but now spring training, Kyle Finnegan. Not to mention, Framber, and like, of course, like Scooble is the head of the snake anyway. You know what I mean? Like it just, and Dingler, Gold Glove, promising young player, blah blah blah. It just felt very fitting that it's like if you wanted to get excited about the Tigers, which is what spring training is kind of for emotionally, it's like, damn, JV, Scooble doing his thing. Fromber, Jansen, like all these things, like it kind of it meshed really well. I don't know if that makes sense, but it just meshed very well that this is a team that's going to be led by the brains and the physical ability of the pitching staff and the coaching staff and the catchers, and they're the ones kind of leading the charge. It just meshed very well.
Yeah, it's better than if they sign some big hitter who lives in Arizona or like the Dominican or somewhere and just isn't at camp yet, right? It makes the first day of camp a little more fun when all your big guns are there and participating on day one. You were not wrong about that.
So let's get to like Framber. It's all like official. We talked about the contract details on yesterday's episode, but now he had his formal news conference, and you guys got to talk with him and Scott about like how this kind of got brought together. So how would you kind of characterize your first impressions of the the most expensive acquisition the Tigers have made in a while?
Well, I'll just say what I kind of committed myself to doing today was learning as much as I could about Framber Valdez. I'll have a story up on The Athletic at Thursday morning that's going to go into a little bit of his background and his path to the Tigers. And the thing that stood out to me was like timing. Timing kind of led Valdez and the Tigers together. Timing, good and bad, has influenced a lot of things in Framber Valdez's life. This guy actually came from a pretty poor upbringing in the Dominican Republic. He was selling peanuts and empanadas to help his family make ends meet. He slept on a mattress with four siblings, grew into a talented pitcher, but he did not sign as a 15, 16-year-old like most big international prospects. Had some nibbles from teams. They did medicals. There were concerns over his arm health when he was a teenager. So he did not sign until he was 21 years old. The Houston Astros gave him $10,000. That's it. That's like in a way a well-known part of his story, but I don't think the one that has really been appreciated by Tigers fans so far. This guy was the ultimate underdog, but it was that delayed timing that led him to the Astros organization at a time where they were ahead of the curve. And that led him to doing a lot of good things. That led him to developing a relationship with AJ Hinch. Now look where we are. 2019, Framber Valdez was talented, but had proven nothing in the big leagues, was still trying to find his footing. AJ Hinch served a year suspension, went to the rebuilding Tigers, took him a while to get things off the ground. Framber Valdez emerged as one of the best pitchers in the league, but his market was just diminished. He had the controversy with his catcher. I forgot he called out his staff for the coaching staff for their defensive positioning after a game in July. There were some things that caused real pause from teams. In addition to the fact he's 32 and he actually did not have a good final 10 starts last season. His ERA was over 6. So I think all these factors lead to him becoming available on a 3-year deal and the Tigers striking at the right time. Here he is. They clearly feel confident. They're not worried about decline because they signed him, they paid him. They're pairing him with a manager he knows and has some confidence in how Framber's going to handle himself in the clubhouse. We've talked Jake Rogers, a catcher he knows who said great things about Framber today and I think has a pretty good rapport with from their time in the minor leagues. So a lot of factors kind of coalesced for this to happen. I don't know that we gained a ton of insight into the exact timing, but to hear it from Framber's camp, they were always content waiting in this market because there weren't a lot of other top tier pitchers out there. Now, it didn't work out that they got 7 years, 198 million or whatever, but Framber on an annual basis is still getting paid like an elite guy. And I don't know. I mean, there are not many situations you would rather be in. You add in the JV factor again, like everyone is all smiles today and even if it's not the ideal contract he wanted, I think he's landed in a place where he has a chance to be pretty happy.
Yeah, and I guess like we're recording this as I said Wednesday evening, so we haven't heard from JV yet. You guys will hear from him on Thursday, but I sometimes you think like how much does it really matter with these guys? Like they just go to the highest bidder. Do they just like we as fans sometimes over romanticize like how much a winning brand might play into like some of these personnel decisions, right? Because like, look, you got to make as much money as you can. You start out at 10K. I'm not gonna criticize you for taking the highest dollar amount. You know what I mean? That's okay. But the Jansen's been very vocal. He was on the Foul Territory show saying like I almost came last year. I want to help win a World Series. Like I imagine JV is going to say very much the same thing. Framber, timing lines up too. It does like these things. I just can't help but feel like maybe there actually is something different here. There actually is something different because everything timeline wise is working toward that. And again, whether it's something that matters in the long run or not, but in the moment, I feel like it does. And one of them is the fact that the whole starting rotation was at the news conference, and they took a photograph together. I'm sure you guys have seen it on social media. If you haven't, we have it up right now on our YouTube. This photograph, Cody, struck me in several ways, and the way I would characterize it is this might be the most on brand photograph in the history of the Tigers organization. So I'm gonna go right to left here. Justin Verlander in his full uniform getup, obviously wearing a hoodie instead of a jersey, full uniform getup. Looks more like a pitching coach because he's about to turn 44 years old. But
He
he's
is
all smiles.
older than the Detroit Tigers pitching coach.
Yes. And Tarek Skubal, if you follow Tarek on his workouts on social media, he loves the shorts. He loves the no sleeves, which he is wearing sleeves, but it's a no sleeve hoodie, and he loves the headband. So that's like on brand, as well. Fromber, it's his day. He's got the nice clothes on, but with the jersey and the hat. And then Casey Mize looks like he's just rolling out of his 930, accounting class at Auburn, and 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 Jack Flaherty looks like he is wearing something that, as a SoCal guy, he could literally wear every single day out of the year, right? So
With his
I saw
default
this.
Jack Flaherty facial expression,
Yes, with the facial expression
or
too.
lack
Like
thereof.
this picture is perfect, bro. I can't get over it. Like everyone wants to compare it to the grip photograph, but it is obviously a little bit different. But man, if that's not the most on brand photograph, and I will say it is a little cool that all of them were there for the news conference.
No, it's good. It's good they show up. One of my favorite details from watching Verlander today, man. Most of these guys are out in their spikes, or maybe if they're not throwing pins or something, they're wearing some Nikes. JV's rocking the black Brooks like running shoes with like the extra cushioning. It just looks like something you wear when you reach a certain age.
That's good. That's a good point. And and again, like it's some certain things are poetic, I should say. It's day one of spring training. They, so it coincides with the Framber. It doesn't have to, but it coincides with the Framber news conference, and then all of them there for the photograph. And with respect to the bullpen guys and AJ Inch, it's kind of like, bam, that's what's going to determine your mood for the next 6 to 7, 6, 7,
Not
8 months.
wrong.
If you're a Tigers fan, so that was quite fitting. I guess before we move on from pitchers in general, we did see Jackson Jobe, and just from photographs that the team shared or reporters shared, seemed like a guy in good spirits, and in the medical update, throwing up to 90 feet 3 times a week, I believe is what it was. So, obviously nothing to report there, but it was kind of nice to see. Yeah, not catch to 90 feet 3 times this week. So that will obviously change throughout camp. But nice to see Jackson Jobe there, and it's been a minute since his surgery. I'm sure he's feeling good, but nice to see him out there, and he's going to be that reminder this whole year. It's like, what's it going to be? Are we going to see Jackson Jobe, or what's he going to be? And day one, we get that as well. Those feelings come up.
Yeah, Jackson Jobe is alive and well. I can confirm he's throwing. I saw it with my own eyes. Not a ton else to report on the injury report. Nothing major. You do have Tyler Owens recovering from a surgery. Troy Watson recovering from an elbow arthroscopy. Bailey Horn, also had the left elbow arthroscopy. Sawyer Gibson Long, a left oblique strain. I don't think we know a ton about that. But the big thing is there were no real surprises. The Dingler name, when you see that leading the injury report, that's an easy way to be like, is this season going to turn out to be cursed? But it seems like good news on Dingler. No one else big has popped up on there, so it could be worse. Look at what has happened at other camps across the league. Jackson Holiday, hamate bone. Corbin Carroll, hamate bone. Tigers have avoided
Lindor.
that plague at least for one day of spring training.
Yeah, and speaking of, like, some of those guys have been in the news for like World Baseball Classic stuff, and obviously the Tigers will be represented in the World Baseball Classic, and with Corbin Carroll, and, talk about weird stuff. Like you see a clip of him like before, just like throwing balls against the wall, and then it's like he's got a broken hand, he's gonna miss, however time, including the World Baseball Classic.
It's
There's a
tough.
handful of names out there that could. That could replace him. Riley Green is one that will linger, obviously, for Tigers fans. Do we have any indication on how real that is? Like, he's been kind of thrown out there a little bit, but not a lot of follow up stuff. And, and then I guess the perspective on whether it would be a good thing or what level of anxiety would be associated with
Yeah.
Riley Green participating in the World Baseball Classic.
Well, I don't know, but I think that has to be part of the calculus, and probably part of the reason he didn't play for Team Puerto Rico, which he was eligible to play for. Like, just do you want him going through that when staying on the field is already a challenge, when being his best version and staying healthy is something he is dead set on? Like, playing for your country it can be a great honor, but there are other players who have opted not to do it for those very reasons. So, look, I think he's expressed some interest in Team USA, but when we talk to Riley, maybe we will get a little bit of a better read on how serious that actually is. I believe Will Vest is also part of the designated pitcher pool,
Yeah.
so it is not impossible that we could see Will Vest. The designated pitcher pool is they can be called up after pool play based on if you need to replace other arms on your team.
Yeah, so one of those things to stay tuned for, but it is kind of in the news, so thought it was worth bringing up a little bit because there are some considerations there. But obviously, it'd be really cool to see like Riley Green like representing Team USA. All right, let's get to the administrative, I guess, part of the day. Cody, you mentioned it a couple times here, but we heard from Scott Harris. We've heard from AJ Hinch, but AJ Hinch, to his credit, is kind of he's done the rounds, including this show. Which, if you haven't gone and watched or listened to that, it was very entertaining. But we heard from Scott Harris, and he shed, I would say, like a little bit of light into kind of how this team came together, specifically with the late pitching additions, and kind of the theme, I guess, if we're gonna overarch it, that some of the most interesting stuff is just kind of the Chris Ilitch piece of this. And I don't know like how to best quantify it. I guess I could quantify it with the amount of money that the team is that the team is added in salary. And if you want to just even go back with just like Finnegan and Torres, I know it's a qualifying offer, but that had to be part of the conversation initially, right? So it seems like Scott Harris is like almost saying like, see, this is not what he said, but I would imagine this is probably what he was thinking. See, I told you that the payroll stuff would not necessarily be an issue the whole time, and now here you go, Chris Ilitch, no problem. Like being all not all in, but you know what I mean, like being willing to literally put pen to paper and getting this team in a position to make a run and do some special things. So that stuck out to me. Anything stick out to you about hearing from Scotty H?
Well, yeah, I think the Chris Ilitch part of it was probably the most interesting, or at least the most topical. Look, in the history of this podcast and probably other Tigers podcasts, it's been very easy to mock and make fun of CI gives us all the support we need lines. Even today, Scott Harris mentioned multiple times, you guys don't understand how competitive Chris Ilitch is. And it kind of sounded like he was probably briefed to, like, be sure to mention that Chris Ilitch is really competitive. But it's harder to make fun of now because the Tigers are going to enter the season right up against the luxury tax, and they made some big, serious signings. Chris Ilitch proved for once that he's willing to spend on this team and that maybe he is competitive. Scott Harris said, when I make that call, I think he was referring to Framber, that, Chris was more excited than I was. And, like, is that true or is that just something you say to make your boss look good? Who knows? But, again, harder to make all the usual jokes because there is now some real evidence behind all these things that we have heard for years. So you know what? I'm going to stop joking about it. Good on Chris Ilitch for investing in this team and making some big moves. Um, yeah, that is what owners should do, and that is what Chris Ilitch has done.
Scott would never like say this stuff publicly because he wouldn't view it as any sort of nothing to gain out of it. And I understand that. I'm not even criticizing that part of it, but like the process of which I would love a detailed account of how everything was going down with the arbitration and then the Framber negotiations and when you make that call and what do you say and like you know could the argument be made that maybe Scott, you should be a little bit more excited at the prospect of getting Framber to your organization?
Well, I was going to say, it would have been nice to get a little more detail on how some of this went down. Scott was not overly forthcoming. It was not the most enthralling media session I've been a part of, but sometimes that's just how it goes. It was early in the morning, so I'll give him a pass.
Yeah, that is true. And an overcast day, so it's hard to. I guess it's easier to be energized when you're at the top of the food chain there. He did also talk about the offense, though. And that's like, obviously something that they chose based on the market, based on their own understanding of their players, their self scout, their metrics, all that stuff, to not make meaningful additions to the lineup. And no lineup is perfect. There are obviously like flaws, and we don't necessarily have to break them down right now. But as you have pointed out, as AJ has pointed out, like there is a little bit of a how micro or macro are you with the state of the Tigers offense, because there are a lot of there are significant pieces that you have to like, and again we all know what the holes are, but there are several numbers out there that could say like, hey, the panic over the offense going into the off season was more recency bias than what we saw through a 162 game sample. Plus, Scott Harris made the point to mention this. Plus, there could be some decent reinforcements on the way. Obviously, referring to McGonigal, Clark, Anderson, Lee, crop of guys. So,
Yeah, look, the Tigers' offense. I've tried to point this out. Like they were 11th in run scoring. Now they were really bad the last 2 months, but for the whole, they were good. They were better than the pitching. That's why the Tigers are investing in pitching. That's why pitching is probably this team's best path to victory. I don't, and given how young that lineup was, logic might imply, well, they should be even better. Now, if you've listened to this podcast, I don't know that I'm like sold on that. I think it's certainly possible, but we've also seen what the bad version of a very similar offense looks like. Like these are some players with some flaws and can be prone to swing and miss and prone to chase and prone to strike out. So with all that said, like Scott's not wrong, but I am tired of the I'm very quickly tired of the talking point. Like, well, last year's team scored more runs than any Tigers team since 2014. This is true. So the last 11 Tigers teams, 8 of those teams sucked, man. So let's stop using that as the baseline comparison.
yeah. It's like, it's not that big of a brag. Like it's like I understand where you're coming from.
It's not.
But
Is it a sign of
that
organizational progress and growth? Yes, it is. Should you be comparing yourself to the top 5 teams in the league instead of the 2019 Tigers? I think so.
That is true. And again, we'll have plenty of time to talk about this. Who's going to be improvements? What's real? What's not? I think there's some very interesting aspects to the run production that and ways of which that will come, but that may be for another time, Cody.
The great
Anything
Lynn
else?
Henning has declared Kevin McGonigal a better hitter at this stage in his career than Alan Trammell or Lou Whitaker. We'll see if that prediction comes true. But it was said boldly in a media session today.
That is putting your flag down. I'll say that. It's putting your flag down. And I, my understanding of Lynn, having never met him, is that he would take that statement seriously. So we'll
Well,
see if
he's
he
been
is.
around. He knows. He
He,
has the perspective. He saw those guys
yeah.
in person. I didn't. So if he's right, then hey, now you want to talk about organizational progress. You got your next Hall of Famer. That'd be something.
That would be something. We'll always remember this podcast when we talked about it. All right, you can follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Cody Stavenhagen. I'm at Kieran_Steckley. Please subscribe, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube, so we continue to grow the show as the season progresses. We appreciate everybody who has engaged with us and followed us along so far. And again, we're just getting started. Make sure to go to TigerTerritoryShop.com for all your Tiger Territory merch. For Cody Stavenhagen, I'm Kieran Steckley. Everybody have a great day.